NFL Week 9 came and went, and we are going to recap the games that I picked last week and go through what went right, what went wrong for each team, and assess the games, assess the teams, and kind of what's next for the teams that I'm going to talk about here and the games that they had. Just a little bit before we get started, I'm doing a little bit of testing of some of the stuff you see on the screen, so it'll get better, but we'll see how we do here. So first one here is Vikings at the Lions. This is one that I chose, Lions minus 8.5 points. Obviously that did not go according to plan. The Vikings beat the Lions. It was a surprising game, to say the least. It was, in my opinion, the worst Lions loss, regular season loss, under Dan Campbell and his reign there. The reason I say that is because we have such a talented team, so many superstars. GM has done amazing on the Lions side, Detroit side, and this is a team I really, really want to see reach a Super Bowl and do some magic there. They're just too great of a team to fall like this, but it happened anyway. Lots of errors on special teams that led to easy points for the Vikings, and the Vikings actually did not play well on offense. Defense, they did well. They did pressure Jared Goff. They did get to the quarterback, but I found the offensive play calling uninspiring. There was one play that sticks out to me, and this is something that I get the same feeling when I watch Texas sometimes in college, is some of their play calls are uninspiring. There was this like 3rd and 16, I think it was, and they called a screen over to the side. I mean, it doesn't make sense. If you're going to call those type of plays where you want to give your playmakers the ball, which I agree with, a screen at 3rd and 16 is not going to get you a first down. That is very uninspiring. The ball was not being moved on the offensive side. They were not able to rush the ball. They did get some decent amount of yards on the air, but that did not amount to anything. Too many 3-and-outs. Too many incohesion on the offensive side. Their O-line does need a little bit of work, but it is what it is. But the biggest thing, in my opinion, was Detroit was coming off a bye, and that was a very important game for them. Not only is it is a divisional game, and Minnesota's not good. So for them to come out being weak, being out-physicaled by the Vikings, and overall just not looking like themselves. They weren't in cohesion, too many penalties and mistakes, critical penalties and mistakes at the wrong moments, lots of false starts, holdings, etc. That was downright embarrassing for the Lions. This was a game that they should have blown out the Vikings any day of the week. If it weren't for those easy field position possessions that the Vikings got due to the returns, turnovers, things like that, the Lions would have won this game. At the end of the day, this was a 3-point game that the Lions, even due to all their issues on the offensive side, special teams, they were still 3 points away from the Vikings. So that's like the little silver lining that you have for Detroit, is you could have such a massive failure of a game, massive failure in game plan and special teams, and do a lot of things went wrong for you there. But at the very least, you have enough talent, you have enough cohesion on the defensive side to give you a fighting chance till the very end and only lose by 3 points. So that's a positive side for the Lions. Now let me get to the Vikings a little bit. This was JJ's game coming back from injury or a soft benching or whatever you want to say. Lots of reports coming out that maybe they're not as confident in JJ as they were before the beginning of the season. And he played okay. I mean, he didn't play great. It was a so-so game for McCarthy. He didn't get a lot of yards. He got an interception. His rating, QBR, and all that stuff was not great. But the biggest thing for McCarthy was settling into this offense against a defense like the Lions, namely Aiden Hutchinson, that pass rush that got to him. He did decent enough. Do I think he's the Vikings franchise quarterback going forward? I personally do not see it as of now. That can change, obviously, with development, Kevin O'Connell doing his thing. the quarterback whisperer, so people call him. But the Vikings clearly hold enough stock on J.J. McCarthy that they got rid of Sam Darnold, got rid of, who was it? Daniel Jones was behind there as well. And they just went all in on J.J. McCarthy. We'll see how that goes. That is what's next for the Vikings. Is if you look at the standings, look at the schedules, the Vikings in the NFC North, that is a tough division. You got the Lions are going to play again. You got the Packers, obviously vying for that, going for that number 1 seed, and you got the Rising Bears, who are looking very, very tough offensively. Ben Johnson is doing great things there, and it's just a tough division, tough schedule for the Vikings. I don't think they'll make the playoffs. I mean, if we look at the standings right now, the playoff standings, let me go over there real quick. We have the top 7 seeds in the NFC. We have the Eagles, Bucks, Seahawks, Packers, Rams, 49ers, and the Lions, with the Bears number 8. The Vikings right now are number 10. I do not see 2 or 3 teams of that top 7 that could fall to that amount, or to that degree that the Vikings would make it in the playoffs. So this is a year the Vikings will miss with playoffs. And really what's next for the Vikings is you just got to develop J.J. McCarthy, get him comfortable in the system. And because you sent the message in the offseason that he's your franchise QB, so treat him as such, get him some reps. Most importantly, keep him healthy. We do not want to... If I see the rest of this season, him taking too many shots, trying to make throws while getting hit, that is not a good omen for the Vikings. I think you would want to keep him healthy, even if he throws it away on 3rd and whatever, just to not get hit. I will be okay with that. You want to... The best thing you could do as a quarterback for your team is be available. That's it. That's all we ask. JJ was already hurt, missed quite a few games already in the season. He needs experience. He needs those reps, and we'll see what he's able to develop into and what the Vikings are going to do this offseason to make their team better. On the Lions side, it's a little bit more positive. Even though this was a terrible game for them, they do have kind of a sight or a vision for that number 1 seed. Do I think they'll get it? Probably not. The division is too tough. They'll play the Packers again. That is the most important. Their most important remaining game on the season is the Packers game in 4 weeks, or in about a month, because that is going to essentially split with the Packers if they're able to win there, to then win the division and get a better seeding versus just making a wild card. I do think the Lions will make the wild card at the very minimum. I'm not sure on if they're able to beat the Packers because there's too much variability there between the Packers and the Lions on what the Lions are able to do on offense. I think on the defensive side, you can say what you want to say about how their defense looked. I think Shepard, on the defensive coordinator for the Lions, is doing an incredible job considering the injuries he's had to deal with, the games he has had to deal with, some of these tough spots that the offense of the Lions have been putting them in special teams, short fields, things like that. I think he's been doing a phenomenal job of game planning these games, getting his playmakers or his defensive players in a position to make plays and to make stops. I think he's doing phenomenal. I have big questions on the offensive side, on the offensive coordinator for the Lions, John Morton. Is he the right guy for this Lions team? I don't know. It's like he doesn't have a path to make this offense run efficiently. We have a lot of highs, a lot of lows throughout the season. Of course, there was that small stretch of 2 or 3 games in the beginning of the season where the offense looked like it clicked. But then when things get difficult on the offensive side, there's pass rush, or they're just not getting the running game going. There's just no creativity there. And that might be, of course, there is that transition there from last year and having Ben Johnson, one of the, greatest offensive minds currently in the league, to someone else in John Morton. My issue here is that Shepard, for the Lions on the defensive side, he came in, or he was promoted within the Lions organization, right? He was I believe, if I have this correct, it was the linebacker coach last season, Once Aaron Glenn went over to the Jets, he got promoted into defensive coordinator. So it's like they never missed a step. He is very familiar with his players, very familiar with the culture. Dan Campbell, obviously, been under him. Pause. But he's been doing phenomenal. It's like on the defensive side, yes, there's like a little bit of that buffer in the beginning of the season, natural with changing in offensive coordinators or coordinators in general, defense coordinators. But he's been doing phenomenal. It's almost like if Aaron Glenn did not leave on the Lions side. That might be a little bit controversial, but he's playing to that level is what I'm saying. If you look at the offensive side for the Lions, you got John Morton, a guy who was hired outside the building because there was maybe not the right guy inside the building, or maybe there was thought that it was going to be very difficult to replace Ben Johnson from inside the building. So you get someone from like John Morton, who's been working with Sean Payton on the Denver team, who's doing incredible this season, by the way. And you bring him in as OC in hopes that he's able to keep this offensive clicking and keep this offense going. There's too much talent on the offensive side of the ball to do this terribly in games. Maybe we'll see them click going forward, but I think it also goes down to a little bit of just who the head coach is. Dan Campbell, I love him. He's great for the Lions. Obviously, the Lions wouldn't be here without him and what he brings to the team. But the question, I guess, has to be asked here. Have we reached our limit with Dan Campbell in terms of what his culture brings to the Lions? I'm not saying like get rid of him or anything like that. I'm just saying like, is this the extent of what his influence is able to do to the Lions? I mean, they just got off a bye. They looked terrible. They weren't clicking. Special teams, offensive side of the ball. It seems like Shepard has things under control on the defense side of the ball, but Dan Campbell is not a scheme guy. He's not a guy who can necessarily run the offense by himself. I know he's done that in the past, but there's a reason why Ben Johnson was hired. And there's a reason why Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator, and we had a lot of success with him. You know what I mean? Dan Campbell is more of a culture guy. I think on the Lions, we kind of almost have the peak of that at the moment. The Lions are physical on their good days, and they're able to get things rolling when they're hot, they're on fire. But anyway, I've talked a lot about this game. I want the Lions to succeed, but there's a lot of questions on the Lions. I hope their offensive clicks going forward. Defensive side of the ball, I'll defend them any day of the week. They've been doing awesome, given what, the injuries and things that they had to deal with on that side. But most important thing going forward for the Lions is, are you able to have a consistent offense? And are we able to keep that high level of physicality and aggression that we're so used to seeing these last, couple of years or so on the Lions side, just consistently to be able to potentially get, to potentially win the division, but potentially also maybe go for that number one seed like they did last year. It'll be tough. Do I think they'll get the number one seed? No. Do I think they'll win the division? I don't know. That's a tough one. It all depends on that Packers game. All right. Next game. And this one was a lot better to watch. It was actually a very enjoyable game. I watched a condensed replay for this one. It was the Colts at the Steelers. I chose a Colts -3. This one did not land for me as my pick. The Steelers just won outright against the Colts. And this was a game, I think, that was good for the Colts to experience. The Steelers, on the other hand, this is a great win in terms of culture and momentum. So even though the Colts lost, 6 turnovers on the Colts side of the game, that was very tough. At the end of the day, it was only a 7-point game with a 5 turnover differential. You have to feel at least somewhat good with that, because the Colts, getting them to a position where they're going to have 6+, 4+ turnovers in a game is going to be very tough. Unless you have, some magic that happened in Pittsburgh during this game. The Steelers defensive line, looked very physical. They played with a lot of fire, defense, offense. All the players in all phases, offense, defense, special teams, they look like they're playing with fire. They're playing with aggression. They're playing very physically. They were playing their hearts out, it looked like. And it was a great game to watch, as a fan of, players doing their thing, and just as a fan looking at this game, it was very enjoyable to see the Steelers absolutely light up sometimes. The Colts have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, but that offense is very, very hard to stop on the Colts side. Yes, Daniel Jones had 3 interceptions. One of them was a terrible interception pass to the linebacker. Another one looked like a miscommunication on either the route or the receiver, or maybe it was Daniel Jones just overthrowing. And the third one was, well, technically the second, but the other one was he threw it. The defensive line had their hands up, knocked the ball, and it was a pick that way. But the rest were fumbles, strip sacks, things of that nature. And something that struck me during this game was that the Colts made no adjustments whatsoever on the offensive side of the ball. I found that extremely surprising. So this is why I say this loss wasn't too bad for the Colts. Yes, it feels bad to have that type of performance, but in the long term for the rest of the season, this is probably a positive for them, because they're able to see what they did wrong when they reach this type of adversity and this type of D-line and this type of pressure. Is Daniel Jones loves to throw to the sideline. We saw multiple throws of him throwing to the sideline. Beautiful balls, by the way. Pause. And he throws deep balls as well. So he loves to throw to the sideline, loves deep balls. I just did not understand why they did not change their offensive scheme. I thought they should have done more intermediate throws, and it was either all or nothing. I think this is what I have in my notes, if I'm reading this correctly. And also, kudos to the Steelers for stopping Jonathan Taylor. That was an incredible feat. Maybe the Colts should have done some more game planning there on getting Jonathan Taylor more involved, at least in the run game. If you're able to get that clicking just a little bit more, it could have made things a lot easier for Indy. Daniel Jones was holding the ball a lot behind that line, staying in the pocket for too long. I felt like they needed to adjust some of their offensive play calls or game plan to, in the middle of the game, to have more quick throws, intermediate throws, 5 to 15 yard kind of range. Instead, you would see checkdowns or just deep throws, which was very interesting in terms of offensive scheme. So maybe that's something they'll look at for future games when they reach that type of pressure. On the Steelers side, it was incredible. I mean, defensive side, I don't have to say much. I already said it with what I said about the Colts. But on the offensive side of the ball, I also found it astonishing how the Colts did not make any defensive adjustments whatsoever. The Steelers all day, Aaron Rodgers, I think, only made one throw. I don't have the stats in front of me, but just from what I remember at the game, there was one throw 15 yards out, and that was the longest throw that I can remember from the game. Everything else was, 5 to 10 yards within that range of the line of scrimmage that he was throwing at. I found it absolutely baffling how the Colts did not have a game plan for this. We knew coming into this game that Aaron Rodgers loves to throw checkdowns, short balls, just throw the ball out very quickly in general. The Colts D-line did keep some pressure on him to do that, but I didn't understand why, and I didn't watch the all-22 version of this. I just watched the condensed game replay, so maybe there's something I missed, but I don't understand why they didn't play the safeties down a bit more, force Aaron Rodgers to throw the deep ball, which is absolutely insane to say, by the way, but you have to do this in games. Make them do something they don't want to do that's not a part of the game plan to make things happen. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean by that. I'm not saying Aaron Rodgers is bad at the deep ball. He's not. I'm just saying that you have to make the opposing team uncomfortable in these situations. All day, Aaron Rodgers was having easy throws, 5 yards from the line of scrimmage, 10 yards from the line of scrimmage at max. Only one, I think, play that extended past 15 yards for a throw. It was absolutely crazy how easy the Steelers were moving the ball and moving the chains. I just didn't understand the lack of adjustment from the Colts to move their players closer to the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's where their playmakers, that's what they're doing. The Steelers offense is doing. They're just checking it down, giving it to their big dudes, double team people. I don't know. I mean, I found it absolutely baffling. But this was an incredible game to watch. This was very entertaining. And ultimately, I think on the Indianapolis Colts side, people were talking about the Daniel Jones that, oh, this is what we were waiting for him to have a terrible game. Yes, he had bad moments in the game, but he's a good quarterback. He stayed in the pocket. He is pocket disciplined. He throws good balls. Sometimes he was a little bit inaccurate. There are those mistakes he could clean up with those interceptions. But at the same time, I understand why Indy is going in on Daniel Jones. Is there another quarterback out there who is going to be better than him immediately? It's very hard to say. My answer to that is no. Even if you were going to draft someone, it will take some time to develop them, get them into the offensive scheme, and all those things. So to me, it makes sense why they're riding with Daniel Jones. They just signed Sauce Gardner, so we'll see. Maybe with that addition, they're able to do more creative things on the defensive side, maybe blitz more, maybe play players closer to the line of scrimmage, or maybe skew some of the protection some other way if they have Sauce on one-on-one against someone. So in my opinion, and what I saw in the game, the coaching and the lack of adjustments on the Indianapolis Colts side, that lost them the game. The Steelers had a relatively easy side on really both sides of the ball. And the biggest question in terms of going forward for both of these teams is, for Indianapolis, are you flexible enough to make coaching adjustments, adjust your game plans during the game, or make more curated game plans for certain teams? Like the Steelers, we saw, and this is a little bit of a repeat here, but we saw that they throw very short balls, quick balls, but there seemed like a lack of a game plan on the defensive side to adjust to that or to really target that. I found that very curious and very kind of weird. So that's my biggest question for Indy is, can you make those adjustments on the coaching side during a game to put the team in the best position that you can? Is there going to be other moments where Indy is going to look like this, like having large turnovers, looking kind of off balance on offense and defense? I don't think so. I know they'll play, I think it's the Texans they'll play a couple times the rest of the season, so that should be pretty interesting in terms of seeing how they make those adjustments, because the Texans have an incredible defense. But that is my main question for Indy. I think there'll be someone who can make a hard matchup for any team in the playoffs. I think they'll easily make the playoffs, win the division, I believe. Let me check real quick, because I'm not familiar with the AFC too much. Yeah, they're winning their division 7-2 right now. The one that's closest to them is the Jaguars, 5-3. I think they'll win their division and get to the playoffs pretty easily. On the Steelers side, I have a little bit bigger questions. Are you able to play consistently like you did in that game? What I mean by that, are you going to be physical? Are you going to flock to the ball? I'm still not convinced they can make a playoff run. They can maybe knock off a team during the playoffs, but if they make the playoffs, but I'm not sure if they do have the capability to make that playoff run. It's an older team, so maybe the high number of games, along with the physicality that's needed in these games for them to be in these games and be competitive in these games, that might take a toll on the team, and we can potentially see a fall off toward the end of the season for that. But can you consistently play with that fire that we saw in that game? It was incredible atmosphere. The team looked great. The most coherent they looked. And can you continue to be physical? That's my biggest questions for the Steelers. If they can do that, if they can consistently do that, they can make the playoffs and potentially knock off a team. I just don't see them making a playoff run because they are not a team that can make huge throws or huge kind of drives. I know Aaron Rodgers has that with him, like within him, that he's able to do that, but I don't think that's their DNA and that's their structure and scheme that they have on the offensive side. And it's going to make it tough for those tougher games, unless you have the Bengals defense. You know what I mean. Now, last game that I saw was the Broncos at the Texans. Now, this one was also a great game to watch. I feel bad for CJ and the concussion, I think it was. I actually didn't check to see if he's going to be there for this next game. But this is when I did get right. I chose Broncos straight up over the Texans. Broncos were underdogs in this game. So I got plus 110 on that on my pick. But I wrote down here in my notes as I was watching the condensed replay of this game was both defenses are awesome. They're great defenses, and I know the stats say that, but watching them in the game, I mean, the D-line on both teams are absolutely incredible. Tight. You have to make tight throws, some risky throws as well if you want to advance the ball sometimes on both of these teams. Good coverage, good defensive schemes, lots of pressure on the QBs on both sides. It's unfortunate that CJ got injured in that game. He wasn't able to, actually pretty early in that game too, second quarter, wasn't able to return. For the Texans though, even if CJ is out, you have to feel at least a little bit, and this is a little bit of a silver lining. I know CJ's your franchise quarterback. He looked great. He stayed in the pocket. He was able to make some awesome throws before he got injured. But Mills is actually a very dependable and great backup QB. I have some notes on here about him when I was watching the game, and he stays in the pocket and he makes steady throws. Let me double check, but I do not think he made a turnover in that game, any interceptions or things like that. So that is something that you should feel a little bit, I don't want to say happy, but a little bit more of like, well, at least, Mills can be a steady and dependable backup quarterback. If CJ stayed in this game, I think it would have been a little bit more interesting, more on both sides. Teams would have gone more aggressive on their play calling on offense to get some points on the board. Also, the MVP for the game was no doubt the Texans kicker, who got 5 out of 5, I believe it was, kicks to keep them in the game. He did amazing. Oh, it says 5 for 6. I forgot. Did one of them get blocked? I think, yeah, one of them got blocked, if I remember correctly. And what do you know? That lost them the game because the final score was 18-15. So it would have been 18-18, maybe some overtime there. But Bo Nix, I have in my notes here, he has a clutch gene. He's able to just keep it going and keep the offense kind of turning and churning in the fourth quarter. He had a big 2-point conversion throw to tie the game up. Also a big run to get the field goal position at the end of the game. He is able to, in these clutch positions, understand what he needs to do and get it done. That is something that you can't really teach to a quarterback. It's something that you either have or haven't, or you have or haven't. You have or you have not. Is that clutch gene, and Bo Nix seems to have it. So that's something very positive for Denver to have. Obviously, if you want to make a run in the playoffs, you want to have a quarterback who is dependable in the fourth quarter. Something that I found interesting was on the Broncos side is Bo made a lot of deep throw attempts. I don't know if this is on purpose or not. And I heard, or I watched Colin Cowherd say this, but I don't know to what extent is true. It may be, is that it seems like Sean Payton is maybe training Bo Nix to be in these type positions, to make those big throws, for potentially doing that in the playoffs and getting some great wins there. I don't know how true that is. I'm not as close to the Broncos and what's going on there and that organization to really know. But one thing that I do know is if the Broncos do have a game plan to make more intermediate throws against defenses like that, then they're able to move the ball more consistently, because I have question marks in my notes here. Is Denver purposely calling deep plays to develop Bo Nix, who we either saw on one side of the spectrum, just checkdowns, behind the line of scrimmage, or some very deep throws, 20 plus yards that Bo Nix did. It was very weird, very weird. There was 0 intermediate throws, and this is something where I would say you need to take a page out of the Steelers' offensive handbook, so to say, and make more intermediate throws, 5 to 15 yards. Just make those throws, move the chain, move the line of scrimmage. So I found that very interesting. Both of these defenses are awesome, and they're able to do great things and give you great matchups and opportunities for the offense to do something. So all in all, Bo Nix, I think, is still developing. I saw some moments there where he made some questionable throws, questionable 50-50 throws. Sometimes you do have to do that against a defense like the Texans, but I think he did that way too much. He should have had a more dependable throws or dependable options. We're looking at those plays. I don't know if that's on purpose or not. That's why I keep on going back to that question. Is that on purpose or not? I don't know. I'm not too familiar with the Broncos on that side. Texans, I think, unfortunately, are not going to make the playoffs this year, so it's more about what they're able to do with the team and going forward. Keep CJ Stroud healthy. I think that should be a message that the Texans have in their organization, because that's your franchise QB. On the Broncos side, they can they're a frisky team, and they can make a playoff run. They could potentially knock off some teams that you aren't expecting in the playoffs. They're going to make the playoffs. I don't know if they're going to win the division. We'll see about that. It depends on how they do with the Chiefs. But it should be pretty exciting to watch them the rest of the season. And in the playoffs, I think they're underrated right now, which is absolutely insane to say, considering they only lost 2 games. But they're 7-2 now. But we'll see what they're able to do. I have some confidence in Bo Nix and what he's able to develop into come the end of the season and be a little bit more mature with the throws. And maybe it's a little bit more development right now in terms of what we're seeing on offensive play calls and things like that, and offensive selection. So all in all, that's my recap of the 3 games. Very disappointed in the Lions. I think that was their worst game, worst regular season game under Dan Campbell, in my opinion. And then Colts and Steelers, that was a great game. Steelers have a momentum. Are they able to keep that going? Colts, they have the talent. What are they able to do to make those adjustments going forward? And then Broncos and Texans, both great defenses. Great game to watch as well. For the Broncos, are you able to develop Bo Nix and get that offense settled into a consistent game for you to make a dependable run in the playoffs? I think that's the biggest question coming out of that game. Anyway, thank you all for tuning into this recap. Do you have other opinions on these games, other things maybe I didn't notice, or other comments, questions on these games? Let me know, and I'll see you for my Week 10 picks.